We made this.
Hello and welcome to Life's Milestones, the podcast right here on the We Made This podcast network that talks about birth and naming ceremonies, weddings and relationships, and death and funerals. As always, I'm your host. My name's Mark Adams and I am a Humanist Celebrant. That means that I am accredited, insured and trained by Humanists UK to perform naming ceremonies, weddings and funerals. Every fortnight I have a different guest on to talk about the milestones in their life. And it's a bit of a first this time because I've got two people. And the reason for that is they kind of come as a couple. They're the team of Nathan and Emily from the Twice as Less Not Perfect Messy Marriage podcast. What it means is, because they're married and they've got a marriage podcast, I thought it would be a cool thing to have them both on at the same time and have the first couple on Life's Milestones. And I'm pleased to say that it worked out really, really well. Having listened to a fair few episodes of Twice as Less Not Perfect, these two are incredibly candid podcasters who go very deep into the very nitty-gritty elements of their relationship. And their relationship has got stronger because of it. And it's something that I very much admire. And the reason I got in touch with them was because I've been all over Facebook groups recently looking for different guests to people that I would normally approach, my friends. I'm potentially looking for people from other countries or people of faith, or basically people that I wouldn't normally encounter who I would be comfortable approaching to be guests on my show. It's not that I won't be doing that. It's not that I won't be going back to my friends and small business owners and humanists and anything else that people tend to associate with me and my friends. But I really was quite pleased with the response I had when I had a chat to various folk on Facebook. And I've got some interesting guests coming up over the next couple of months because of it. So yeah, that's how I met them. And they're brilliant and incredibly friendly people who I thoroughly enjoyed meeting up with and podcasting with. So I hope you enjoy my interview with Emily and Nathan from Twice as Less Not Perfect. With me at this time are Emily and Nathan from the, and I hope I get this right, Twice as Less Not Perfect, a Messy Marriage podcast. Hello Emily, hello Nathan.
Hello.
Hello, thank you so much.
You got it exactly right.
Perfect.
Now, the title is a mouthful, but the content, I've listened to some of your stuff and I'm having a great time. I mean, I see this as a relatively honest and open podcast, but some of the stuff you've looked at, like critiquing your own wedding vows, baggage from previous relationships, bad habits, lockdown and hashtag me too. I was like, shit, these guys are happy to, like, you know, be honest on a podcast. And that's kind of why I wanted you on board, really.
Well, that's great. We're happy to talk to you, and we're just really sort of excited about sharing all of our messy stuff with the world. It's a little scary, but I think we want to be an example for other couples, especially, and just all people in general, about how to sort of take a look at yourself honestly and figure out how to grow, and that the mess is all part of the process, and it's okay to acknowledge it because that's how you get better.
Yeah, that idea that, you know, oftentimes in relationships we're, you know, especially today in the social media environment, it's very much everything looks perfect. Everyone's displaying this sort of ideal of perfectionism. And then you're sitting there having a terrible time in your relationship and looking around and you're like, well, is anyone else going through this? And they're like, oh no, we're perfect. We're great.
Everything's great.
Everything's beautiful. And you're like,
over here on
oh
Instagram.
no, I must be twice as fucked up as I think I am.
Right, so everybody knows that they put their perfect life on Facebook and Twitter.
Yep.
But then
Yeah.
they see everybody else's perfect life and don't think, oh, that's their perfect life.
oh, they've got a better life than me.
Yeah.
We all know what we do, so why don't we kind of get our heads around the fact that that's what other people are doing too?
Exactly.
It's very hard to stay grounded in that idea that we're all imperfect when all you see is the same message. Everyone's doing better than you.
Yeah, just that constant idea of like, it's a filter. Everything I'm seeing is a filter. Everything.
Well, it makes you feel a little bit crazy, like you're just being gaslit by the world.
Gaslit by the world. Like, am I crazy? They're like, yes.
I think everybody's crazy, Nathan.
Exactly. Yeah. We're all little nuts. We're all all got a baggage. All got a lot.
The sooner we embrace it, the better we'll all be.
Exactly.
I think. We hope.
I think you're right. So I started this podcast to kind of complement my business, the job that I do for the main part. What made you decide that you wanted to air your dirty laundry in front of the world?
I think it really did come from that feeling of feeling very alone. When we were going through a really tough time, we would reach out to people and say, man, I'm having a hard time. And it felt like people didn't want to go there if they were married. They were like, oh, no, I don't want to talk about that. Or if they weren't married, they'd be like, kick that person to the curb. You don't need to deal with that. Like, that's nonsense. Get out of there. And we were both kind of like,
who do I talk to?
Who am I supposed to talk to about this? And I felt alone and you felt alone. And so I think it really came from that feeling of seeing how much benefit we found when we faced it and we faced each other and got down in the muck and really unpacked it all. And it was uncomfortable,
counseling,
and terrible, and
it was
messy,
awful.
and it was painful. And but then we came out of the other side of it so much stronger. And that idea that if we could just let someone know that if someone had come to me and been like, it's okay and what you're feeling is normal, and everybody who's ever been in a long-term relationship has felt this way at some point, you're not crazy, you're not broken, you're just a bit of a mess and you need to go deal with it.
And you're not alone.
And you're not alone in that. I would have had a lot more confidence going forward into it.
And have you had a lot of positive feedback from people who are in couples saying that, fucking hell, that's me as well? That kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's been like kind of the coolest thing, and we got a lot of feedback about like the baby episode. We had an episode just about kicking the idea back and forth about having kids or not. And we had so many people reach out to us, people who have had kids, people who have not had kids, being like, oh my gosh, this was exactly what we were going through. And it was painful and it's still painful today. So thank you for talking about that.
Well, we'll be looking at that a little bit further on in the show as well. I think personally, listening to some episodes, I sat there almost wincing. And I was like, that's me, that's him, that's me, that's me again. Oh shit, that's me again. I suppose that's him. Oh, that's me again. And it was an experience. It's not an easy listen, I don't think.
Oh, that's interesting feedback.
Yeah.
We haven't heard that. Well, maybe we got some feedback about the Me Too episodes and how it's sort of made a couple people look back on their past relationships and
striking a balance of how to talk about these hard things, but give it some levity and not be too precious about it, and show that these are painful things that we can actually find some humor in now that we've dealt with them, and I think that's been a valuable thing. I think that what for me has been a really important thing on the personal side of things is to really think about that male view of dealing with emotions, and helping break through that a little bit. That's like my little personal side mission of this whole thing, is like modeling that it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay, in America especially, we have such a closed off version of manhood and what that looks like, and always being strong and always being brave and always being this and that. And it's really hard to feel vulnerable and be vulnerable as a man in America, but there's so much pressure from our society to maintain that. And so to model what it looks like, to just be like, I'm a mess. I'm broken. I'm sad. I cried. There are times I feel feelings that I don't even know. I've never experienced them, and I don't have the words for them. And it took me 3 years to find out the word for that feeling. And that's what it was like. And if I can do that, you can do that too. So that's like that's my side project. This is like my little side quest in this video game of podcasting about marriage we're doing.
It's a pretty hefty side project.
Yeah.
It is.
True.
I think I could talk to you about your podcast all day, but we are here to do Life's Milestones. So shall we get started with a guest profile?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. How old are you both?
I'm 36.
I'm 35.
Okay.
So let's talk about that then.
Yeah.
As you are my first couple as guests, is there any kind of negativity between age differences in America compared to here? Whereas we have terms like toy boy if the man is younger, and it's sugar daddy if the man's older, and things like that. Is that something that is as prevalent in America? Not that there's a huge age difference between you. There's 10 years age difference between me and my partner.
Don't you think?
Yes. So
We have boy toy.
yeah. So in America, we have the cougar, which is the older woman.
There's the trophy wife, which is the younger
the
woman.
trophy wife. Yep. And then we
Which
have
is translated to trophy husband. We have that as
we
well.
have trophy husbands now, and then like the young people have fuck boys. That's the one.
Yeah, sure.
The young people.
boys.
Yeah.
Or
Fuckboys means something much different here, actually.
does it?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
does it mean?
fuckboys is men who aren't interested in relationships but lead women along to suggest that they are so that they can get in their pants.
Oh, sure.
And remember, pants means underwear here.
Yes. Sure. Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
So
do
you
we
have-
have a specific
We might
word
have-
for that guy? Like player?
A player.
A player?
I think
I've heard player.
fuckboy in America is perhaps a I don't know, a subsidiary of the player. Like I think they're in the same wheelhouse, they're
Yeah.
under the same umbrella. Jerks, really?
Yeah. But I think boy implies that they're younger than you.
Sometimes.
Right?
I don't
over
know.
here? I don't know.
True.
I'm not a fuckboy, so
Well,
I couldn't
No,
tell
I've
you.
never been a fuckboy.
yeah, me neither.
So, where are you both from and what's your backgrounds?
Okay. I will start. I'm from Colorado, so I live in the state that I was born in, though I've bounced around quite a bit. My parents got divorced when I was a baby. I was an accident, and so when they found out that I was being born, they tried to make it work, and then it really didn't. So, but my dad lived in California when I was a kid, so I would spend a lot of time in Colorado with my mom. That's where I went to school, but then I would travel and visit my dad in Southern California and then later Northern California. So I feel like I'd spent a lot of my childhood in both of those states. And now my dad lives here, so everybody's here, and I don't get to California as much, so I miss it. But that's me in a nutshell.
Nathan?
Yes. So I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, which is the capital city of the state of Arizona. My parents are both from Indiana, though, so I had a very Midwest upbringing out in like the desert, right, out in the Southwest area, right? So I had a religious upbringing. My parents were high school sweethearts, and they have been together their like entire life, essentially since they graduated high school. I'm the oldest of two brothers, and I was also an accident. I was not planned. So yeah, grew up in the church, and then went out of state to college in Colorado, which is where I met Emily, and then spent several years bouncing around to New York City and to Las Vegas and back to Arizona for a time. And I was a 4th and 5th grade teacher for 4 years, which I think informed a lot of who I am today and what I do now. And
Yeah.
and that's been I came from a theater background, so I went to school for theater and then went and joined a teaching program and got my master's degree and taught 4th and 5th grade. So those two things kind of inform a lot of what I do now to a great degree.
Well, yours was way more thorough than mine. I feel like I missed a lot of stuff. My parents were divorced. Here I am.
Well, the next question is, what do you do that makes you interesting? We've already covered your brilliant podcast, but is there anything else you want to tell us about you? Like perhaps you mentioned off air that you were an actor.
Yeah. So my dad was a theater director, and so I just kind of followed in his footsteps and done a lot of Shakespeare and worked at a lot of Shakespeare festivals here in the U.S. and then went to school for musical theater, which is where I met Nathan. And so I'm a singer, and currently, since we're in quarantine and there's no theater happening right now, I'm doing a lot of private voice coaching and directing a radio play that we're both doing, which is super fun. So I've always been very creative and very much into the arts, primarily performing arts. And I spent a number of years in New York as well, doing the thing that I guess every young actor tries to do and be on Broadway. And then, life led us elsewhere. We got married, and then Nate's opportunities took us to Las Vegas. So, yeah, I'm really interested in storytelling of all forms and vulnerability and what that means as a tool for strength and finding ways to do that with my particular skill set, which is sort of how the podcast came about and how we kind of stumbled into that. I'm not great at being open and vulnerable and sort of just authentically, unapologetically me. I like to hide behind a character with lines that are written for me, and I can kind of be very strong and confident in the, embodying someone else with this sort of disguise. But the podcast is my private mission, is to just be me and own my ideas and thoughts and opinions. It's terrifying, and it's just a constant exercise. It helps that we're just speaking to a void in our basement in our pajamas most of the time.
Podcasting in pajamas. Don't break the fourth wall. We all do it. Just don't tell anyone.
Right.
You're lucky I'm not in a dressing gown.
We wouldn't judge you at all. So,
I mean, I'm 100% sitting in a Harry Potter onesie right now, and it is
good.
Delightful.
Yeah, I have a onesie. It's Back to the Future themed, and to be honest, I'm wearing it, but I put a sweater over it
to look respectable.
I didn't put clothes on until about 7 o'clock today.
That's the world we're in now.
Yeah.
Is this what being candid on your fucking podcast feels like? Oh dear.
It's great because then you're also in the state of mind where you feel really comfortable and just you, and podcasting is such an interesting medium that's gathered such steam lately, and it's one of the most intimate forms of entertainment I think we have out there, because you're just speaking to one person's right in their ear.
Yeah,
so I think it's
great.
really fascinating and powerful. And I'm excited about all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Okay, shall we move on to talking about birth and naming ceremonies?
Yes.
One at a time. Why don't you tell me a favourite story from your childhood?
Well, you just said birth and naming ceremonies. So the first thing that popped into my head was... So I've already said that I was an accident, but my mom, before she found out she was pregnant with me, had this dream, and this voice was speaking to her in her dream, and she saw this sort of fuzzy, glowy image of a young woman in a white dress with long blonde hair, and the voice said, "Nancy, this is your daughter, Emily. And and she was like, what? And then she woke up, and just a few days later, she found out she was pregnant. And that's why my name is Emily.
Amazing.
And I used to be blonde, but, well, I will be soon because quarantine. I haven't been to the salon. But yeah, so that's why my name is Emily. I don't know. That's just been this story that's been told to me for years and years. So that's not even from my childhood. But I heard it a lot when I was a kid.
How about you, Nate?
Yeah. So I, as I said, I was also an incident, as it were. But
wow, we've gone from accident to incident. It gets worse.
It's an incidental. So I was named. Actually, one of my favorite memories as a child. All of my nuclear family was in Arizona, but all of my extended family was out in the state of Indiana. I was named after my grandfather, Robert, who I never met. He died a year before I was born. He had a heart attack, and that's my middle name, was named after him. So about once every few years, my uncle and aunt would come and visit us. And I just remember being so overjoyed every time that would happen, because he would just tell me about this father of his who I never met, who my grandfather was. And he would tell me these stories about him. And it was like this connection to something beyond myself that I could never actually know. But I felt like because I was named after him, it somehow instilled in me a better understanding of myself, or if that's not who I was, it was like, that's a part of me somewhere. We'd be out on a hike or a walk when I'd be little, and they'd be like, oh, he walks just like his grandfather, and I remember would perk up a little bit and raise my head a little higher and feel a little proud of that. That's good, because I would hear how they would talk about him and how much they loved him and what a good and decent person he was. And it would just make me feel like, if that's happening, I must be on the right path. I must be doing something right. So I always just cherish those times when I would have that connection to family, and they could connect me to myself and connect me to my past in a way that I was never going to be able to experience. I was never going to know him, but I just always felt so much more connected to who I was and who I was, capable of being when those times would come.
That's cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, there's something so important about knowing your ancestry, I think, and really understanding where you come from if you can. I didn't discover that till I was an adult, just several years ago, how important that was to me when we took that tour of the South. And, even if some of the stuff you discover is not great stuff, I have family from Georgia, and they're deeply rooted in racism and stuff like that. And that was hard to see, but really important. And I didn't have a great sense of that when I was a kid. I think just because my family unit was fractured.
I think it's fascinating, that sort of thing, because I tend to incorporate that sort of thing into my naming ceremonies. I will explain someone's name and where it comes from and the significance to the family. And I'm so glad that means a lot to you, because it means a lot to the parents of the people I'm doing the ceremonies for. And if that can be passed on to having a real meaning to the person who the naming ceremony is for, then surely that's the right kind of ground we should be covering.
Yeah.
So do you have children?
No.
No, we do not.
And are you planning on having them or not? I know you've done an hour-long podcast on this. Let's do the edited version, Sally.
Sure.
The edited version is that we have been around the horn. I mean, we've been back and forth about it for years and years now. We both assumed we would have kids, and then early on in our marriage, we realized, we have a choice in the matter.
This is actually a decision that we can make.
Since then, we haven't been able to make that decision.
I think it's like a boomerang. You know, we keep throwing it. We're like, well, we'll deal with that later. And we throw it. And then it keeps cycling back around. Like the topic never disappears for too long. You know, it always sort of comes back.
It's a sign, I think, telltale sign that maybe, you know, it's worth considering.
Yeah. And I think the way that marriage has changed in the last several decades, it's pushed that decision down the line more and more. And it's also made it less of a given, you know, because suddenly, you know, there's that feeling that like, I must get established first. There's these other life milestones I have to hit first.
Yeah.
And then I can do that, you know, so I have to have the career first. I have to have a house first. I have to have a partner first. And then that, whereas, you know, in the 50s and the 60s and before, you went for it.
You did everything.
Like, just do it all at once. Like, you know, we'll figure that out as we go. And
it sounds so stressful.
It sounds so stressful. And I know my parents were trying to plan it out, and then it didn't happen that way. And, you know, and they just said, we just went for it. It happened and you just go.
Because it's life. You can't plan. Yeah. You can't plan for all the stuff.
Yeah.
No.
And how boring if you did.
Yeah. There's that little bit of release of control that's really hard to give up, I think. That's the biggest thing, is that sense of like, am I giving up this level of control that I have, that I enjoy, that I've built up? And am I willing to just offload that and kind of throw it to fate? And know that this will be a completely different, albeit equally exciting adventure. It'll just be a different adventure, you know?
Yeah. So if you do have children, do you think you'll have a naming ceremony, a christening, or another celebration to welcome them into the world?
I personally don't want a christening. I'm just going to say,
yeah,
I didn't grow up very religious. So
yeah, I was baptized twice because I don't know, the first one didn't take or something. I don't know. But, you know, and I think
I like the idea of a naming ceremony.
I love the idea of like a naming ceremony,
That's really
a welcome to the world. And I would absolutely love to do that. I would not personally want to tie it to religion in any sort of way, because I feel like it's not good to foist religion on children who don't have any agency or self-awareness yet, you know. And I think that comes from me growing up in it. When I was very little, a baby, I got like the sprinkle, the drops on the head, you know. And I remember being in church and feeling a little like, well, I don't remember that. I don't remember it. That doesn't mean anything to me. That has no importance in my life, you know.
And I guess the difference between a christening and a naming ceremony is that the celebrant will give you a copy of the naming ceremony that the kid can read 10 years later.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's lovely. That's really lovely.
I mean,
I found out as a kid because my very religious Southern Baptist grandmother was trying to get me over to the side of Christianity. She would sneakily take me to church when my mom was out of town. And I found out way later that because I didn't get the sprinkle on the head, that I was probably going to hell.
Oh man.
And so that was not a great thing.
What a trip
to live through. Yeah. And my mom assured me that wasn't.
I took classes in middle school where I actually went through courses, and I went through a whole process of getting to the point where I could then make the personal decision whether or not I would get baptized, right? And then I did the full dunking, right? We did the whole like submerged in the pool in front of everybody. And I thought that whole process was really cool. Now, again, once it didn't take, but it didn't take that time either. But, you know, I felt I had agency in it. And I really appreciated that process, you know, and I think it guides me in a lot of things, even though I don't necessarily I don't go to church anymore, and I don't follow that line of thinking anymore. But as far as the stuff we were talking about in terms of how one leads their life, I was like, this is cool. I can get behind that, you know.
Definitely get behind something.
What would you call that state of Christianity in America, and I am generalising here, but there's in England at least, there's the term C of E. It stands for Church of England, which means that it's the general kind of Protestant, no one really bothers going to church, but they still kind of have Christian faith. If someone's along those lines, what's your religion? C of E. Do you have an equivalent of that in the States?
I mean, is it just Christian?
I mean, I think here in the States, we really have a big disparity, and I think it's become more and more. I think, we have a term here called WASP, which means white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And there are these sort of three big Protestant buckets here in America. We have Methodists, Lutherans, and Baptists, and they've all gone through their big divisions and things around things like slavery and things like racism, and they've split into little different groups and things of that nature. And then of course we have Catholicism as another piece of that puzzle. But then we have this sort of big chunk of the American people, which we call evangelicals, which are like the born again Christians. And so they're not a specific sect of Christianity. They're not Lutheran. They're not Methodist. They're like the mega churches that you see.
Lots of money.
You
see them on TV.
Yeah, and
they
so
support Trump.
There's like there's this idea of like the prosperity gospel.
Yeah,
which is the idea that like leading a good Christian life will actually make you wealthy and prosperous and successful. And so there's a bit of a differentiation between those. It's very muddy here. And there's a large percentage of the people in, I think, Lutheran, Methodist, Protestant, who are, I don't know what you would call them, but they're the group that goes twice a year, right? They go for Easter and they go for Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
There's a huge part of the country that very much does that, but isn't practicing at any other time, that grew up in it, but doesn't participate in it.
I had a friend in high school that used to call herself a cafeteria Christian, where she would just kind of like a la carte, they would pick and choose, what worked for them, because some of the stuff they just didn't believe in, depending on. And would you say, Nate, that a lot of people kind of bounce around from denomination to denomination? Like, I know people who are like, well, we went to a Methodist church and then we switched to...
I think there's a mix. My parents, I've been a little bit of everything. I've been Baptist, I've been Lutheran, I've been Methodist, I've been evangelical. I've been kind of all of those things at one point in time for another. I didn't really understand as a kid the big differences. I didn't really seem much different to me in terms of those things. My parents always chose the church based on the pastor. What was what was the pastor saying? What was the person who's going to be the one delivering this message to us, to our family, is going to be guiding us through things? That's kind of how they made their decisions. So they weren't stuck on one denomination. They've always focused more on the people within it. And there have been places there have been times in my life growing up where I'd be like, I don't like this church because of this reason. And my parents would pull me out and we'd go to a different church, Do
that makes a huge amount of sense. I also really like the term cafeteria Christian. But no, that makes a huge amount of sense. And I think that's probably a sensible way to look at it if you do have faith. I like that. I really like that. Cafeteria Christian.
Yeah, it's nice. I'll have the green Jell-O of redemption, please.
Now, if there's jelly, then I might be converting back.
Hold on.
I'm not, just to make it very clear. But you said that you were more interested in a naming ceremony. Is that because you specifically don't want it to be faith-based?
I specifically don't want it to be faith-based. Just because I didn't grow up that way, that doesn't feel like that's who I am. But I do feel like something like a naming ceremony is a great way to contextualize a new human's place in the world and where they came from and why their name was chosen and what it means and how it's important to the parents and sort of the connection to everything else. And I grew up, again, not really religious, but I got a little taste of baptism from my grandmother, and I got a whole lot of sort of more what we call new agey, a little bit pagan, a little bit, sort of more Eastern religion, I would say. So a lot of the way I view our humans' place in the universe has to do with how we're all connected sort of energy-wise to each other, and, the sort of the butterfly effect that everything I do and will affect the world in a big way, and that my thoughts, are things that the things I think will become true if I, so a lot of I don't know if you guys know about Wayne Dyer and sort of setting an intention and really changing the way you think in order to change how the world looks to you. Yeah. So that's kind of my faith is wrapped up in a lot of that. And so I do think that it's important to have a sense of our connection to each other. And I think that that's a lovely way to sort of celebrate that.
And I think, in terms of the ceremony itself, I know every culture has some form of a naming ceremony, and it's a really important thing. I think if you look back into things like the Old Testament with Judaism and things like that, and tracking those lines and tracking one's history, and it's not even so much as just saying this is this new person and this is their name, but here we are as a family, and this is us as a family saying we are going to collectively take responsibility for this little person's development, and the successes and the failures they have going forward are going to be dependent on the things we do now. Here in the first 4 years of this child's life, it's really on us. It's on the village, right? Because as soon as they hit 4, society takes over.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Yeah, we're no longer the biggest effect on a child once they hit 4. After that, it's society. And so I think that cooperative coming together and saying we mutually together as a unit take responsibility for the development of this person is a big deal. I think it's really a big deal.
And that brings in the idea of godparents too, which I think is so lovely. And we're so isolated, I think, particularly in the U.S. because we're such a huge country and everybody's moving around and suburbs. But that we often lose our connection to an extended family or a community. It, like they say, it takes a village, and sometimes it doesn't look like that at all. It's just the family unit, and that's it. And having godparents who are committed to being a part of the development and upbringing of the child is a great way to bring in the community.
I grew up without my family close by, and I feel like I'm jealous of people who had godparents. Like, that would have been nice. It would have been nice to have somebody you could go to who wasn't your parents and be like, man, I don't know what to do about this. This is really hard. And get some help, get some support. If you're in a nuclear family, which we are more than ever now, it's hard to know where to look, outside of your friends and your peer groups. But sometimes I don't want to go to my friends and peer groups and ask about something because they don't know anything. They're a bunch of idiots, just like me.
Just like me.
So the term that Humanist Celebrants use as an alternative to the faith-based term godparent, I actually think makes more sense for the role that person actually fulfills for the young person, and that's guide parent.
Oh,
I like it.
I love
so
that.
So do
I love guide parent. Yes.
Oh, that's great. That says everything it needs to say, doesn't it?
You just know.
And it's recognisable because it kind of sounds like godparent.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much.
Okay. Oh, I'm stealing that.
I love it.
Please
That's
do.
grand.
Kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Guideparents.
Well, because, it's always lovely when you have like that cool aunt that you can look up to, or an older sister or an older cousin or something. And you do kind of, when you're a kid, sort of view those people as your guides. You have your parents who tell you what to do and keep you in line and give you boundaries and all the things that your parents should do. But then you have these other role models that help guide the way for you.
It's a very like hero's journey thing, right? It's very Joseph Campbell, right? I love that. It's, it's everyone wants an Alec Guinness, to show you the way, That's really, he's a Jedi guide parent. That's what we all want.
Perfect.
Oh, I love it.
Shall we move on and talk about marriage? Now, we know you're married. You've got a marriage podcast. So tell me about your wedding day.
Oh, yes.
Well, we had one of those tiny weddings.
Yes, we did. Before it was cool to do.
Before it had a name, we had a micro wedding.
Yeah, we had a micro wedding before anyone knew what that was.
And it was mostly because
we were poor.
And we wanted to have it in New York City. We really wanted to. That's where we fell in love. It was where we lived at the time. And because it was a destination wedding for everybody, we decided to keep it really small.
Yeah.
So that meant it was in the wedding party, it was just Nate and myself and our officiant, Nate's best friend who married us, Ivan. He got ordained in the Internet Universal Life Church. Was that it? The internet one?
Yeah.
And did we have anybody else?
We had a couple friends who were in New York, and then everyone else was
but I
family.
mean, in terms of the wedding party, it was just us three, and then a couple people got up to speak, because we knew that if we had a traditional wedding party with brides, what are they called? Bridesmaids.
Yeah.
And groomsmen, that we wouldn't have any guests. So we just did it nice and small, and we had about 25 guests.
People. And so where we got married, we actually got... when I moved to New York, Emily had already been there for a little bit, and she was taking me around this area of Queens called Long Island City.
Right.
And she took me to this place called Gantry Plaza State Park, and it has all these old shipping piers that stick out into the water, and it overlooks the East River, and you can look over and see Manhattan. It's beautiful.
A very famous Pepsi Cola sign out there.
And so she took me to this spot, and we were not dating at the time, but we're standing there on this pier watching the sun go down, and we're kind of looking at each other, and it was a little this is interesting. I don't know what's going on right here, but this is certainly nice, and I don't mind it. And then eventually we did end up getting together, and
a year later,
and it just became obvious that should be the place that we should get married, should be on that pier. And that's what we did. And it was
amazing.
It was awesome. The coolest thing, one of my favorite little side things about that is we had this whole thing set up, and we figured out where it was going to be. And we went out to figure out kind of where the seats would go and all these things. And there's this trash can, this New York City trash can, sitting there. I was like, oh, well, we got to move that. And I go over to move it, and it is welded to the pier.
There forever.
It is there forever. Yeah. And I was like, oh no.
What do we do?
What do we do? And so that trash can was our altar. I literally got a piece of
plywood,
2x2 plywood,
threw it on top of there,
put it on top of it. We covered it up with a beautiful white tablecloth, and we had a trash altar. It looks great in pictures, but it was definitely a New York City trash altar.
I mean, isn't
it was
that
awesome.
Just
so
the
New York.
Perfect metaphor
Perfect.
for marriage.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to your best mate as an officiant.
Yeah.
I'm led to believe that basically anybody who pays $35 over the internet can legally marry people in America. Is that right?
This is
That's
true.
right. Mm-hmm.
This is true.
That is not how it works for people like me in Britain.
Yeah.
Really?
No, my weddings aren't legal. Despite the fact I've got training and accreditation and insurance, etc., etc., only priests and registrars can do legal weddings. We are campaigning for that. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where anyone in America can do an internet course and be an officiant. But Yeah, it just fascinates me, the complete difference, despite the fact that we don't really seem to feel like there's huge differences between America and the UK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it is weird because there's a little nuance there here in the States. It's a little strange because yes, you need the officiant, but more importantly, you need the two witnesses,
right,
for each party, and then that has to go to the city hall.
Yeah.
And so that was the critical thing. Like anybody can be the officiant, but
they can get certified.
But you've got to get the signatures and the witnesses to actually make it happen.
Right.
That's the thing here.
And does the officiant have to have faith? Can you have a non-religious officiant?
I think you have to at least declare yourself something or other.
Yes.
Right?
Now no, you don't, because it's a civil marriage, and that's the thing about the United States is that marriages in the States are not religious; they are civil, right? Like all marriages to be legal have to go through this civil avenue that involves the courts and the registers and all those things, and religion plays not into it at all. However, if you're depending on your religion, you might not be married in the eyes of the church. Right. So like if you're Catholic and you don't go through the proper channels of courses and things of that nature, and you don't do it the right way
in the church,
in the church's eyes, you are not married.
Right.
Even though legally on paper you are. Yeah. So that's the big difference. I think that we see it's just there's so much variety, you know, and that's why we have a lot of that sort of like, well, I grew up Catholic and I grew up Lutheran. And so we have to have a Catholic wedding, not because I'm really that concerned about Catholicism, but because in the eyes of my family, my community, my church, it won't be legitimate unless we do it this way.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
Good grief. And did that bother anyone you know that you had a civil ceremony with an officiant?
Not my side of the family. Not my
I mean, my parents were religious, but their wedding was a bit of a disaster in terms of their parents. So my mom was always like, elope. I'll send you the $100 and a ladder. Like, get out of there. Avoid it if you can. So that I was very fortunate that my parents never, and there's a big difference. Like, I'm a guy, and so the pressure on weddings as a guy is just different. No one cares. No one wants to know about your dream wedding. No one asks.
I do want to know about your dream wedding. I guess that's my job.
It was it. That was it. That was
great.
Exactly what I wanted. It was small, low key. I wanted like us to be the people who decided what happened. And I didn't want to do it to please anybody else.
That was the hardest part.
That's the hardest part. But I think having a destination wedding made that much easier because we did all the planning ourselves, and we made our own playlist for the music, and we made instead of like a wedding gift thing at the table, we made a mix CD.
A CD.
Oh, you made a CD. And I remember like I hand crafted the little CD cases, every single one, and
we spent a lot of time at the craft store.
A lot of time at the craft store.
A lot of
I
scrapbooking
love
stuff.
wedding favours. I don't get to see them because I've gone by the time that the people have their receptions at my weddings. But wedding favours are so lovely.
I love them too.
We love that it was a CD because every now and then people will be like, "Oh, we listened to your CD the other day," and we're like, "What?"
Or what?
And they're like, "Why did you put that song on there?" And I'm like, "Shoot, I don't know why I put that song on there. I was 25, right?"
It's great though because people will listen to it and think of us and think of that day, and I think everybody had a really good time. We had our reception was in a restaurant across the way, and we just rented a room.
We had a giant ice cream cake because there was no way we were having a wedding with a regular cake. We were having an ice cream cake.
An ice cream cake, and then we had a bunch of little individual ice cream cakes for everybody. And they didn't melt.
Yeah. I mean, it felt nice because it felt like we were kind of playing by our own rules.
Yeah.
And we had the distance and the space a little bit to ultimately make decisions, and it just made it easier to plan, and it didn't get out of hand, you know.
I love alternative wedding cakes. I've seen them made of donuts. I've seen them made of cheese.
Yes.
But ice cream is a new one to me, and I'm impressed.
I love an ice cream cake.
Ice cream cakes in America is a big deal.
I've seen the
Cold
Rice
Stone
Krispie
Creamery. Yeah, we have this place called Cold Stone Creamery, and that is like their jam is these ice cream cakes, and they
make good ice cream cakes.
They're a big deal.
Just to get it right in my head, it is like the layers of a wedding cake, but made with ice cream.
So there'll be yellow cake, and
then chocolate,
or some type of cake, and then ice cream on top of it, and then like all the frosting and the fondant, just like a normal cake, but it has like an ice cream center, but on top of regular cake. It's really great.
It's a lovely thing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So, you talked about your mix CD. Is that on Spotify? Because if that's on Spotify, you could share the playlist with me.
Oh my gosh, we'll put it on Spotify.
Put it on Spotify.
Yeah, we'll do it.
What song did you pick as your first dance?
Oh.
We had...
I know it.
Yeah, you go ahead.
It's the song Good Day.
Oh, is that our first dance?
Yep.
No.
Yep.
No.
Yes.
Not our official first dance.
Yep.
No.
Yep. She's
not
wrong.
The jukebox song.
Yep.
No.
It's the song Good Day by Jukebox the Ghost.
That's the first on the album, but that wasn't our first dance. You wrote a song for our first dance.
Oh, that's right, I did.
Amazing.
I did write a song.
You surprised me.
That's right, I did. I love that I forgot that. I don't know, it might be. But yeah, I know I did write a song.
Maybe we should put it on the mix.
Oh, dear. If I can find it. Yes, I did write a song.
It was a ballad.
Oh, my gosh.
That's beautiful.
I wrote a ballad. Just remembering this just now. Oh, my gosh. That's crazy.
I love that you forgot.
I was like, it was that song by Jukebox the Ghost.
No.
That's right. Yeah, it was a slow ballad that I wrote, and I had our old piano and voice teacher from undergrad write an accompaniment to it so that I could then record over it. It's a trash recording. It's terrible. I did it on like a Mac computer with no microphone. I just like winged it. It sounds terrible, but it's a good song.
It was very sweet.
I'm sure it was beautiful.
It was.
Oh dear. I'm blushing.
Yeah. At least I didn't write a song for you and you forgot it.
That would have been worse. It would have
been worse if I forgot.
It's better to forget your own song.
Yeah.
I'm glad you remembered. I would have been like, wait.
Shall we move on and talk about death? The first question is a big one. Are you scared of death?
I don't think I am.
No.
The only thing that scares me is how I die.
Yeah, like dying is different than death. I fear the act of dying more than I feel the state of death, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense.
Yeah. I feel pretty at peace with things.
Yeah.
And while I'm not religious, I do sort of feel like if it happens, it's meant to be that way. And, I don't know. I think that I get scared of things like a plane crash or a car crash.
The dramatic things.
Dramatic things where it doesn't end quickly.
Sure.
But other than that,
I
don't think so.
I think when I was a kid, I was terrified of it. And what I think is interesting is I remember being very young. I think I don't think we appreciate how deep some of these things are, like this awareness, this sort of sense of what's coming and what came before. I remember being little, like 5, 6, and being like, I was born on January 23rd, 1985. What was going on before that? Like, I don't remember it. I wasn't there. What was I? Like, and it's such a big, mind-blowing thing to comprehend. But I think as a child, you start thinking about the front end of that early. You're like, well, what was going on before I became whatever is going on right now, me, before I was self-aware, my mom and dad are talking about the things that happened before I was born. And like, where was I? What was I doing? Was I hanging out? Was I like something?
Floating around somewhere?
Floating around?
Well, the idea of consciousness, right? And I remember it being explained to me as a kid that after we die, because, you know, we weren't really believing in heaven, that after we die, it was just like it was before we were born.
Yeah. And
that freaked me out, the idea of nothingness. And I was like, well, won't I be scared? What will I do? What will I? And no, because you're just going to
be. It's just going to be. You know, and it makes me feel peaceful because I'm tired. Like
you're already exhausted.
This whole life thing is just like it's work and like there's nonsense going on all over the place. So like it just feels like a nice long rest, which will be hopefully well earned by the time it rolls around. So
I do feel this sense that there's like consciousness on some level, the spirit, if you will, that will transfer to something or dissipate and become something else. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, like the idea that
I love that idea.
Energy continues to go. Matter doesn't disappear. Matter reforms itself in some form or place or some way. You know, we're all star stuff. I love that kind of thing, right? And I think it's just that more than anything, I appreciate the focus that it gives me in the present. When I started to make that shift between death is not a scary thing, death is a reminder of the importance of today and the importance of being present and in the moment and stoicism and that idea of looking over the edge of the abyss and being like, in a moment, this could happen. And if I'm constantly reminding myself that I could go at any moment, then I'm better prepared to actually go about the work of living.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the Stoics have like that phrase, memento mori, which means remember. It just literally means remember you will die. Just remember it always, and you'll be better prepared to walk through life.
So have either of you experienced the death of a loved one?
I've been very fortunate in that I haven't experienced anyone extremely close to me die, but, you know, grandparents. The closest person to me to have passed was my grandmother, my dad's mom. She and I were really close. She's the one who took me to church when I was little. She and I were really close, and towards the end, I think she always said I was one of her favorite grandchildren. Whether that was true or not, I don't know. She probably said that to everybody, but our bond felt really special, and she was really important to me in a lot of ways. But I mean, I'm lucky so far. Both parents are around and siblings and all of that.
Yeah, I had my grandmother who she had breast cancer 3 separate times in her life, and she defeated it twice, and she got past the 5-year mark the first 2 times, right? Where she should have been in the clear. And the 3rd time, I was 17, 18 years old, and she actually lived at our house while she was steadily getting worse and worse that 3rd and final time. And I think just being present for that, and there were definitely times where I looked away and I was not prepared emotionally or developmentally to really stare that in the face and really confront it. But it was there, it was present, and that awareness. And when she went into hospice, and it was like a mile away from our house, and when we got the call that she had actually passed away, we actually went that night, and that was the first body I had ever seen. And it wasn't at a funeral, it was in the room where she had been. And it was, I did not feel afraid. I didn't feel sad, because, you know, the saddest thing was the year leading up to it. And so to see her there and be like, well, that's over. That fight is over. And like, I watched you fight 3 separate times this terrible disease. And I'm so relieved that you don't have to do that anymore, you know? And so it gave me a sense of that there are things worse than death, and the act of dying is oftentimes worse than the event itself. Mm-hmm. And I that perspective as like an 18-year-old was jarring, but real. And I think the other big events of my life have been more like brushes with death, where people I've loved came close to dying or avoided tragedy and things like that, you know.
So can I make another one of my ignorant British guy questioning an American questions?
Yeah.
Questioning American questions here. My granddad died at a similar age for me as yours did for you. There was absolutely no way I would have been invited to the hospital and I would have seen his dead body. Is that a norm in America, that you are expected to go and see the dead body? I mean, I know of the open casket thing, which is almost unheard of in Britain, but that's not even that. That's in his hospital bed. Is that a norm, or is that something that was specific to your family?
I've never had that experience.
I think it was specific to the moment. I think it was very much, you know, it happened late at night. I happened to be awake. I had a friend with me, like a high school friend was actually there at the house with me when it happened. And my mom had to go. And it was more of a sense of like, you know, I'm 18. Like, I'm going to go with you, Mom, because that's your mom. So I'm going to go with you. It's definitely not something I think is expected. I don't know if it's something in the norm. I think it was just more out of a sense of suddenly it wasn't about my grandma now. It was about my mom. It was about being there for her. And there was something that felt like I wanted to see her off in a private moment, in a way that felt private, where it wasn't other people looking at me. It wasn't going to be performative. It wasn't going to be religious. It wasn't going to be anything other than the moment in the space and time that I needed to be there. You know?
That feels more natural to me than an open casket.
I remember situation. That way more than I do her actual funeral. I remember very little about her funeral.
I know a lot of folks. I mean, my parents were, my stepmother at least, she and her siblings were in the room when both of their parents died. And so they were all there before and the moment when it happened, and then they were there after and said their goodbyes and left. And that, to me, feels like a really beautiful thing. And like you said, Nate, intimate and very personal. The open casket thing is something that seems really bizarre to me, and I couldn't.
Yeah, I think, and we're trending away from that in the United States.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We have more and more cremations every year.
So you can't cremate a body that has been treated for an open coffin. Is that right?
I think you can, can't you?
They can now, yeah. Well, there are some that do. I don't know rules and the laws about how they do it, but I know there are some who will do a viewing and then do cremation. I don't know how, you know, all the rules around that, but like my grandma was cremated. I know both of my parents plan to be cremated.
Mine too.
You know, so yeah, it's very much a Midwest thing. When my other grandmother passed away, there was like an open casket, and that was the first family member I'd ever seen in an open casket, and I was like, this is bizarre. I was like, I don't like this at all. I was like, this is just strange, you know.
Do you think it's a generational thing? You're a few years younger than me, but is it perhaps that baby boomers are more likely to get comfort from an open casket than Generation X and millennials, do you think?
Perhaps.
I think possibly. I think it's also regional as well. Like that was like the Midwest, and I think that's
South.
A big deal. In the South, I think that's a very
my grandmother had an open
big
casket.
deal.
And
yeah,
I wasn't there, but she was buried in Georgia.
You know, I think out here in the West, it's a little less. You know, a little less so. You got people in the ground faster because, you know,
it's dry.
Yeah, it was dry. It was dry. You know, we had our Wild West craziness, and so they kind of, someone would die and they'd prop them up, take some pictures, and then have them in the ground as soon as possible. Like, so it's just a different. Yeah, the West has a little bit of a different less, I'd say, precious approach to it.
Yeah.
To it,
Right.
maybe. Yeah.
So I think I know the answer to this after what you've just said, but do you want to be buried or do you want to be cremated?
Oh, I definitely want to be cremated.
Oh, to be honest, I'm hoping by the time I go, there's some crazy newfangled,
There are.
exciting
You
thing.
can be a tree pod.
Be a tree pod or a
There's all kinds of
compressed
stuff.
diamond, or
Yeah.
you can be vinyl now.
Yeah, you can be
They
a
can
record.
put you on an LP, which, you know, that's super cool. Maybe that wedding song I wrote.
Is that the ashes or you yourself? Because I've seen stuff like art that's made from ashes and
Yeah.
tattoos that are made from ashes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like
I love
all that.
all that. I love all that, like, out there stuff, like something that, like, really symbolic of that person.
I do not want to be a tattoo.
You don't want to be a tattoo on me?
I want to be my own person.
That's great.
But I do like the idea of being like a tree, you know,
Yeah.
but being part of the earth, going back to the earth in a real way, not in
Yeah.
a casket.
Are the tree pods legal in the States? Because they're not legal here yet.
I don't think they are
They're
yet.
not yet?
No, I don't think so. But I know there is a push back towards, like, green burial.
Yeah.
Where it's and there's whole cemeteries that are dedicated to it, where it's, you know, we're not going to treat the body with all these chemicals, and it's going to be, we're not going to do a whole casket thing. We're going to go do a shroud, and we're going to do this a little more organically.
Yeah.
And I think I like that idea way better than a box.
Yeah, and I think for people your age and my age, I think the options like water cremation and tree pods, and I mean, even the one, I don't know if you've seen the exhibition in Las Vegas when you lived there, the
Yes.
what's it called?
Bodies?
Bodies.
Bodies, yes.
The plastination.
Yes, we saw that when it toured into Denver.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, yeah. That's fascinating.
Super cool.
Yeah, because I saw that in Las Vegas, and it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
It's so fascinating.
And
Yeah.
I think any of those options for me would be cool. Cremation, if necessary, just not burial.
No.
Yeah. You know, there's, but what's funny is, like, on the flip side of it, the display of the body thing, I think, is really, I don't like that. But yet there's, like, in New Orleans, they're like, we'll prop this person up on a bench and you can come sit next to them for a
that
bit.
lady.
And, like, there's crazy stuff going on in New Orleans because they just embrace death in such, like, a macabre and yet joyful way.
I love that.
And I love that. I love that sort of thing. Like, yeah, like, ideally, give me a second line parade.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then turn me into a vinyl record at the end of it. That's fine. That sounds great. Like, it better be a party.
Your vinyl record would be the one that you wrote for your wedding that you forgot
Exactly. They'll be like, he doesn't remember this song, but it sounds okay.
But he's forever
It's a total bop.
connected to it. It's a major bop.
Yeah. And I think that idea of it being joyful, that's the most important thing. I don't want somber, sad nonsense.
Celebration.
Yeah.
A reminder of all the good stuff, all the wonderful qualities, and all the funny things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have either of you got any idea of a reading that you might like to be read at your funeral?
That's a great question. I'm very wishy-washy about things like that. For a minute, I will think, "Oh, this is it. This is the most important. This is what I want read at my funeral. This song I want played." And then I change my mind. There's a Mika song called Emily that I want played.
Yeah.
It's really bouncy and fun. But I don't know. Do you have a reading?
I don't know if it would be a reading in the terms of, like, a passage from something. I would likely have some lyrics from a song called Up and Up by this band Reliant K that I've been listening to since I was, like, 13. They're tattooed all over my arm right now.
Good.
Or the song, and maybe part of a song called The Great Unknown by Jukebox the Ghost. So it would probably
Would
be
you
song
actually
lyrics.
have the lyrics that you've got on your arm? Would they be the ones that you'd have read out?
Probably.
Amazing.
So the tattoo I have on my arm is like it's a collage, and everything in the collage represents a different song from this band. So I have it's like a traffic cone and a key and a ladder with a missing rung and mountains in the background, and then 2 banners that have some script and some lyrics on them. And they all represent just different things that I found valuable to me as I've gone through. There's like an alarm clock on there and things like that. And so it would probably be some combination of some of those ideas on my arm. Yeah.
Okay, I just thought of something.
Oh, Emily just thought of one.
Go for it.
It's a little nerdy, but I am a Shakespeare nerd.
Yes.
It's the epilogue from As You Like It. And I just had the great good fortune to play the role of Rosalind at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival last year. And yes, I'm going to brag about it because it was one of my favorite experiences. And directed by a dear, dear friend that I grew up, talk about guide parent. She was a real role model for me. And thinking about this, every time I delivered this, I just felt such electricity, and I got to speak directly to people about the story that they just experienced. And when you think about the play as a metaphor for life, can I read it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
You better do it really good, though.
Oh, stop.
Shakespeare it up.
I'm so nervous. No, I won't.
I am British, remember?
Oh, God. I won't do a dialect. So, a lot of Americans think you have to perform Shakespeare with a British dialect.
You're not even doing it right.
So, it's short, I promise. It goes like this. It is not the fashion to see the lady the epilogue, but it is no more unhandsome than to see the lord the prologue. If it be true that good wine needs no bush, 'tis true that a good play needs no epilogue. Yet to good wine they do use good bushes, and good plays prove the better by the help of good epilogues. What a case am I in, then, that am neither a good epilogue, nor cannot insinuate with you in the behalf of a good play? I am not furnished like a beggar, therefore to beg will not become me. My way is to conjure you, and I'll begin with the women. I charge you, O women, for the love you bear to men, to like as much of this play as please you. And I charge you, O men, for the love you bear to women, as I perceive by your simpering none of you hates them, that between you and the women the play may please. As I am a woman, I would kiss as many of you as had beards that pleased me, complexions that liked me, and breaths that I defied not. And I am sure as many of you have good beards, or good faces, or sweet breaths, will, for my kind offer, when I make curtsy, bid me farewell. And besides the very obvious binary stuff in there, I really just love that it speaks directly to people about a life that was hopefully well lived and intentionally executed, and take it or leave it. I hope you got something out of it, as I certainly did. Mm-hmm. And for this brief moment, we experienced it together. And now it's time to go.
Yeah. I tell you something. That is the question that everybody struggles with. And that is the first person that's been brave enough in, 15 episodes to read out their poem. So, big up.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought of it in the moment. But it's really, it's a very conversational and kind of odd bit of text from Shakespeare. It's not the most poetic, but to me, it's the most intimate.
Yeah.
With the audience. Yeah. And it's always gotten me. Yeah. Every time I got to perform that, I was just so moved and grateful.
And it's such a weird transition in life when you start thinking about those things. Like, I've had that thought to myself. I'm like, what if tomorrow I go? Mm-hmm. Emily doesn't know what I'm hoping for and what I'm wishing for and what I want to say. You know, and it's a very strange thing to be like, I guess I should start telling you. I'm like over here taking notes, like epilogue from.
It's not just on the podcast that I encourage people to do this. I encourage everyone I know to make a note of the reading they would like, and the music tracks that they would like. He doesn't like it much, but my partner knows what I want playing. I think he's more concerned about telling the funeral director that Linkin Park needs to be played in a crematorium more than anything.
Yes.
But he knows, and so does my dad, so does my brother.
Yes, I love it. Yeah,
That's really great. It's, I mean, it's sort of been in the back of my mind. I guess I should figure that out, but now it... Even more
you're both
now.
going to know because you both sat next to each other while you've been talking about it.
yeah, exactly.
Do you know what else you would like then? What music tracks would you like for the entrance, the reflection, and the exit part of your funerals?
Ooh.
The exit, for sure, that Mika song.
Right.
Emily.
Oh yeah.
Entrance. Maybe Fields of Gold by Sting.
Oh yeah. There you go.
I'd
probably have Good Day.
Yeah.
I would have Good Day by
Play Out?
yeah, probably is
Outro?
my play out.
Okay.
It's Jukebox the Ghost, and it's just this very bouncy, happy song. You know, it's basically talking about like everybody said what a good day that it was. You know, and you know we smiled because we liked it, and it's just charming and
Sweet and simple
kind of,
and
it's just
quirky.
great. Yeah, and you know, I don't know. I have to like. I love music, so it would be like one of those things. I'd have to like. I'd make a playlist
Make a lot
of
of
200
lists.
songs and then slowly start to whittle down from there.
I think I'd like Claire de Lune, the Debussy piece to be played at some point.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It would probably be one of those things because I like all these weird bands that no one really knows about. Where it'd be like, now you have to listen, you sons of bitches. All those times I was
our
like,
wedding
you should
CD.
listen to this band. And they'd be like, well, maybe. It's not really my thing. I was like, now strap in. It's going to be 30 songs that no one's ever heard
It's gonna
before.
be a whole thing.
Your wake, everyone will be like, well, wasn't he a dickhead? Do you use the word dickhead in America?
Not in
not
such
as
like
much
a
as we should.
not such a charming way.
Okay.
I have to tell you, it's like so great because when I graduated from undergrad, I spent 3 months in Branson, Missouri, with a bunch of Brits doing a show called the 12 Irish Tenors, which is insane. Like it's absurd. And this was like my first interaction with like people from Britain. And my friend Rob would come in and he'd be like, you, Nate, are a fucking cunt. And I was like, oh. And, you know, and like we went through this whole thing back and forth of him explaining to me all these different ways that he could call me that and how, and which ones I should take offense to and which ones I should not. And I was never like really quite offended. I was just sort of like, I don't know how to respond to this. Like, I don't really care if you call me that, but I'm like, but you're saying this with a smile and you seem so happy about it when you say this to me.
This isn't the British stereotype I know.
It's like, I don't know what's going on.
And that word over here, of course.
Oh,
is,
yeah. And that is like forbidden here. You
the
don't call that
number one
anyone
worst
that
word.
ever.
I mean, I wouldn't use it at a funeral, but, you know.
Right? And it's just, yeah, what's terrible is you start hanging out with a bunch of people who throw it around liberally and you then go home to your parents and you're like, yeah, what a fucking cunt they are. And my mom would be like, oh, and I'd be like, well, you have to understand. It's not good. It's not good.
Didn't work out.
Didn't
so
work
great,
out
sure.
so well. She'd be like, well, you're not in Britain now.
Not in my house.
Well, you've both been brilliant, and as an experiment, I am pleased it went so well. Where can people find you and your podcast on the internet?
Oh my goodness.
Great. So we're on Instagram at A Messy Marriage Podcast and on Facebook at Messy Marriage Podcast.
And then you can listen to us on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those good
Google,
things.
Pandora, most places you can find us.
And it's just Twice as Less Not Perfect, A Messy Marriage Podcast. And then We have people email us at lessnotperfect@gmail.com so that they can give us show suggestions and feedback and let us know what weird marriage quandaries they want to hear about.
That's right.
Yeah.
All about the conversation.
Cringy. The cringier, the better. Cringy conversations.
It is cringy, but it's compelling.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's good to hear that feedback.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on Life's Milestones, both of you.
Absolutely. Thank you
It's
so
a
much
pleasure.
for having us.
And I'd just like to say one more time, thank you so much to Emily and Nathan for joining me on Life's Milestones. They're the first people that I've approached through various podcast and networking groups on Facebook. And they were so lovely and so friendly, and I had such a positive experience that it made me think that I'm going to do a little bit more of it. So I've got more folk that I've met through that networking group coming up over the next few weeks, like I said. And I'm looking forward to them. A little bit out of my comfort zone, having these kind of conversations with people I don't know. But I really did enjoy meeting Emily and Nathan. So it's definitely something I'm going to carry on doing. As always, I'll be adding all the songs we mentioned to the playlist in a few days. Keep your eye out for that. So thank you for listening to Life's Milestones, and I'll see you next time.
Life's Milestones is a podcast on the We Made This podcast network. The show's host is me, Mark Adams. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at MarkAdamsHC. You can also find me on Facebook. Just search for Mark Adams Humanist Celebrant. My website is humanist.org.uk/Mark Adams. Regular listeners to the podcast can claim a 10% discount on my fees for a naming ceremony or wedding. Just make sure you quote Milestones when you get in touch. The theme tune for Life's Milestones is performed by Zach Reagan, and the logo was created by Carl Bryan. Follow the show on Twitter at Life's Milestones. Thank you for listening.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Pick a disc.
And I bought Riot first, and I was like, oh, I really like this. And then I went back and bought their first album, which I can't think of the name of the first one right now, but I listened to Riot more than I did the first one for sure. Yes, I recently found my old iPod, and you know how it used to, there's a section under settings that would tell you your most listened to songs? This was the top, like however many tracks it is, like 14 slots. And then it was everything else I listened to.
Right in the childhood.
Robin, the hooded man, do. Mate, before we do anything else, that soundtrack.
Yeah, you're a big fan of it, weren't you? Digging it. I could see the admiration for it in your little twinkle in your eye.
Oh, it twinkle, it put a tear. It's beautiful, beautiful music by a band called Clannad, who obviously played that kind of music generally. Yeah. And it won a BAFTA.
Oh, okay.
That's because it deserved it.
Yeah. You know what? It definitely fit the aesthetic to the shows.
Cinemortuary podcast.
Yeah, I want to say, and I don't like say this lightly, but this might be my favourite 2 minutes of any film we've reviewed on the podcast so far.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking wild. It is pretty wild.
Sure. If I was given the director's chair and $5 million, this is the sort of thing I'd do.
You'd do that for 90 minutes.
Yes.
It's with the roulette wheel
just
again.
non-stop.
What if he vomits playing cards? Beautiful.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.